When we delve into these three ethics, the earth care, people care, and fair share, we can kind of get off the rails very easily because they are philosophies that are being applied to various different situations and scenarios. But it is important to get started with a little bit of a depth and understanding of how these actual ethical systems apply to a design and also how do they apply to our worldview when we are applying permaculture. So the first that we're going to get started with is the first of the three, which is earth care. Now, when we think about earth care, this is very much similar to what has been done in the 60s and 70s when this movement came about of conservation of the earth, conservation of the oceans, of forests, and so on and so forth. However, in permaculture, we don't look at systems as separate because nothing is separate on the earth. It is all interconnected and interdependent in many different ways. And so when we look at earth care as a situation, we can't just take 100 acres of trees and make them protected from humanity in a way that will keep them safe. Because when we look at that kind of a conservation approach to ecology or to ecosystems, it is, first of all, underpinning this duality that humans are separate from nature, that humans are detrimental to nature, and that in order to protect nature, we need to keep humans separate from it. And this is not a constructive way of moving forward with resource or ecosystem management in our future. So when we think about a proper holistic ecosystem management or earth care situation, we need to understand that the ecosystem itself has a stronger ability to thrive when integrated with the species that are dominant nearby or in its core. What does that mean? Let's look at the example of the squirrels. Obviously, a great fun example that I love to use over and over again. The squirrels, picture them in a forest. They are interacting continuously with that forest. Most of the time, they're foraging, so they're gathering seeds and nuts and bedding material for their actual homes. So when we think about them gathering seeds and nuts, it's only actually a small portion of that food that they will actually consume. So it's something like 15% of the food that a squirrel harvests that it will actually eat. Right? This means 85% of that food is either buried into the ground and composts, it's buried into the ground and germinates as a seed, or it's buried into the ground only to be discovered by another creature or stolen by another squirrel that was watching it. So when we look at the three outcomes of how this interaction with the ecosystem affects the ecosystem, we have the first one being that food biodegrades underground and it composts and produces a better, richer soil that helps the trees that are giving food to the squirrels in the first place, but also that are giving leaves and branches, which is shelter. So one result is that it emboldens the soil and makes a richer soil. The second is that it actually germinates into fruit producing or nut producing trees. So this increases again the food supply. The trees produce more leaves, which is more bedding, which is also more soil for the other trees that were present. So again, another positive contribution. The third option, where we're actually having that food stolen or discovered by some other creature, well, this is actually an important social interaction as well because there are other species who maybe didn't prepare enough for winter who will find some of this food and eat it. There are other squirrels who maybe are not as apt at remembering where their cache of nuts was or collecting their cache of nuts. And so this secondary, surplus of food being redistributed to those other creatures that need it is a social support system that is actually benefiting that ecosystem. So to bring it back to earth care, a proper way to manage an ecosystem in a way that benefits the ecosystem is to engage with it in a way that respects the natural patterns of that ecosystem's evolution. And so what would it mean for humans to engage with a forest in a way that was caring for the earth, but that is also benefiting the longevity of that of that forest as well? If we compare the two models, protecting a swath of land that has forest on it from humans because we are destructive, it just delays the inevitable because we've reinforced that also that this is a resource that is protected and therefore it's valuable and maybe, we'll keep it safe from humans for a time. This happened in pre-World War I and World War II. There were many swaths of land that were protected in England, and then in this need for more fuel to fire the steel mills and actually produce weapons to fight against Hitler. This was a protection that was removed from these areas of land. So then we could go in, harvest the wood to further the mission that was at that time fighting a war. The problem with this is that that's not actually a long-term protection of an ecosystem. Ecosystems are going to last much longer than the human society that we are in today. And so we need to engage with them in a way that actually not just maintains them as a sustainable model, but builds up their capacity to grow. So comparatively, an ecosystem that is managed sustainably, much like the squirrels engage with a forest near you, is to look at the forest and build up the potential to support the species that is humans that are considered a threat at the moment. Why are we a threat to the forest? Well, because our understanding of harvesting is to go in and clear cut, and that devastates the ecosystem. So if we continue to maintain that idea of harvesting, that management strategy, then yes, we are going to be detrimental to the woods. But in fact, humans have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Looking at many different ancient societies, there were ways of managing the forests that were much, much more beneficially impactful than the way that we clear cut a forest today. For example, many different tribes in the Amazonian region were using a strategy of forest management and soil building that actually created a rich terra preta, which is a biochar mixed with composting soil, that is the foundation to some large areas of the Amazonian rainforest. In these areas of the Amazonian rainforest, there's sometimes more than 20% more edible fruit, nut, and medicinal trees in that area than would be normally found in a naturally occurring forest, right? We can define naturally occurring some other day, but the idea of a forest that has occurred without the pressure of humans or the influence of humans. So we understand that these humans engaged in a way that the forest actually standing and living and growing was more important to them than cut down as timber. The nuts and tree nuts and fruits and medicines that were produced from the living stands was of more value to those species, those tribes, those units of community as a living resource than it was as something cut down and burned or built with or sold. So when we look at how to engage with an ecosystem in a way that truly protects the earth, we actually have to look at how to integrate our own behavior into that ecosystem in a way that will benefit the ecosystem, benefit ourselves, and interconnect the two in a way that they grow positively together, right? The humans can't actually, at that point, clear cut a forest because they're dependent on it for food. They're dependent on it for medicine. They're dependent on it for purifying of water. They're dependent on it for building materials and fiber. And so this is a integration of human need in the ecosystem that you want to protect. And that is a true mechanism for environmental protection or for earth care.